Hi everyone and welcome back to Creator in Conversation. I am your host, Owen Macaulay. Since 2011 I have been making and publishing comics as part of Lightning Strike Comics. As of February 2024 I founded the Tyler Academy of Sequential Art, TASQ Art, Ireland's first and premier academy dedicated entirely to sequential art design and production. Joining us in today's episode of Creator in Conversation, the official podcast of TASQ Art, is Mr. Derek Tyler Attico. Derek is a good friend of mine and a friend to the Academy. He was one of the very first lecturers to teach at TASQ Art. Derek is based over in the States, but thanks to the power of Zoom, he was able to deliver a short Fundamentals of Writing in Fiction workshop, which was delivered around this time last year as this podcast is going out. And then he taught for the first semester at TASQ Art as well, teaching the fundamentals of writing for comic books to our students of Tyler Academy of Sequential Art. Now, Derek is known to many as being the author behind the Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, the captain from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Derek was invited as part of the series of fictional autobiographies of the Star Trek captains to write their story, and the level of detail Derek went into was brilliant. He was able to create and forge his own narrative, and as well as go into the background of characters who literally, as he would say in this episode, were only mentioned in passing in one episode once, and Derek goes in and creates an entire chapter around these characters. It's amazing. So sit back, relax and enjoy. Apologies for the bit of a fluster on my start at the start of this episode. Me and Derek were catching up and listening before we went into the episode, but don't worry, there's lots here to enjoy, be you a fan of good fiction or a fan of Star Trek. So sit back, relax and enjoy. Okay everyone, so this is a special episode which might end up being a collaboration episode, but it definitely is. It's a reunion episode between myself and Derek Tyler Attico, who those who've been following the Creator in Conversation channel, you might have seen we have a couple of relaunches of reissue episodes from Dublin Comic Con. We've done a couple of interviews, and Derek was very kind. Just coming off lockdown, we did Zoom interviews because it was such a weird time coming back from it. And so I managed to get folks to talk at Comic-Con via Zoom, and we zoomed in live before an audience. Now, sometimes you did pre-recorded segments, and but now here we are once more. And how are you keeping, Derek? We were talking just before the recording, catching up, but it seems you have a lot of irons in the fire now at the moment.
A lot of irons in the fire. Thank you very much for having me. It's good to see you. It's good to reconnect with you, man. We've had that one time that we met actually in person in 3D. At it was at Comic-Con, and after reading for Sisko, so that's two maybe 2.5 years now. Yeah, so that's like forever ago, right?
And we kept trying to align to meet here, particularly at WorldCon, and we missed it by the skin of our head. There's that much.
It's still kind of in your neighborhood, and we missed that. But we'll work it out. But it's great to see you, man, and it's great to be here. Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great. It's so funny. I'm thinking back to the first time we spoke. It was just before the Sisko book came out, and we were even trying to figure out, okay, how do we pronounce each other's names? How do we get to know it? And it was great, was unknown to me at the time, I ended up doing a little mini tour around the place. I think I ended up at Malta Comic-Con, a few others, Lisbon, but I had bookmarks from when I met you at New York. And then I ended up taking them all around.
That's right. That's correct.
But so what's great is about this opportunity is, when we first spoke, the Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko is yet to be released. When I met you at New York, you read a chapter, but a lot of it was still under wraps. And now finally the book has been out now for a period of time, so we can talk a little bit more without spoiling anything about the text itself. So first of all, you are, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the first creator of colour to have written for Star Trek across prose, games. There's
short stories.
short stories. Yeah.
And I was a correspondent for about little under a year, for about a year altogether, for Star Trek magazine. So I did essays and articles for them as well. So those four mediums. So short stories, essays and articles for the magazine, which is official Star Trek. The role-playing game, which is official Star Trek. And of course, the novel, Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko. 60 years of, well, next year will be the 60th year. So 60 years of Star Trek. And I'm not saying other writers haven't done that before, but I'm the first of color, first Black guy to do it. And somebody asked me, why are you even mentioning that? I said, because that's a big freaking deal, as Joe Biden would say. That's a big deal. And I think it's just sometimes it's good to acknowledge milestones and the things we do for ourselves and to let others know, hey, this thing happened.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because what's great about the legacy of Trek has been that diversity has always been present on screen from like the original series.
Right.
But then when you go and you look in at the creation of anime, even now it feels like we might have been taking a few steps back in terms of some recent progress or lack of progress. But it's great to see you championing and also taking the time out to acknowledge it, because so often, you know this yourself, as creators, as writers, we're the last to actually give ourselves the credit, because it's so weird, isn't it? Damned if you do, damned if you don't. You don't say anything, no one notices. You do say something, look at this person, follow them.
Right. Okay, what is he thinking? Yes. Right. And so I just keep focusing on the work and try and keep going forward. But every now and then people, friends, people around me say, hey man, you did that thing. And I'm like, oh yeah, I should mention that. I mean, and I think now that I'm moving more to social media, I have accomplishments that they talk about me, but also I think they might in some way let people know that these things are out there and possible. I don't want to be I'm happy to be the first person to do that. I definitely don't want to be the last person of color. I want somebody to do more. I want somebody to say, hey, I've written every medium of Star Trek, and blew that Attico guy out the water. I would be happy for that. So,
Just before I came on, I noticed, you might not have even noticed, now you were coming off a call yourself as well, but it just announced Star Trek Strange New Worlds has been renewed for a 5th season, but it's also going to be the last season because the 5-year mission. So they just said, so this is, and the producers were saying they were thankful to CBS that they could finally fulfill the 5-year mission onto it. But when it comes to like film, TV as well, is that something that's definitely in your hindsight when it comes to this Trek franchise? Like, yes, I definitely want to write for the screen.
Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely said that.
Yeah. I mean, what are you going to hear? No, I don't want to. Yes, I would love to write any series. I would love to work on a film. I mean, anything. I mean, I'd be happy with anything. 2 years ago, Kirsten Beyer, who was the showrunner for Discovery. She's written episode Discovery, showrunner for Strange New Worlds, and written episodes for Strange New Worlds. And she is a prolific just writer on her own, and has really made her mark in Star Trek literature with Voyager stories. She came to the Shore Leave Convention 2 years ago and she ran a panel as if it was a writer's room.
Nice.
And I was invited. So it was Dayton Ward, who's a phenomenal writer for Star Trek, Kelly Fitzpatrick, who was a co-writer, a partner of mine and phenomenal writer, David Mack, who's a phenomenal Star Trek writer, and myself. And so Kirsten, it was the writer's room. And she was like, we're going to create a fictitious, season 3, first episode. And this is how we're going to run it through. And people were in the audience watching how it ran through. And I learned in that hour and change, I learned so much from her. it's nuts. It's really nuts. And if being a writer's room is anything like that, man, I would love to. Yeah, I'd be all in. So, but yeah. So it was fun. That was fun.
It's always interesting speaking to other writers about different mediums. So I remember listening to an interview with Mr. Mark Waid, and obviously he's so prolific when it comes towards comics. But then someone said, well, what about prose? And apparently completely different kettle of fish for him. He was saying he wrote a short Superman prose story for the Further Adventures of Superman. But that medium, that approach, different muscle. What's fascinating is in your career is that because you've written for games and you've done the journalism aspect and you've done short and long fiction as well in it, you've kind of you're adapting. So for you, for your process when it comes towards writing it, then is it just heart of the story, or should I say soul of the story, going straight into it, or is it like it's just getting from point A to B and then the rest is just format? Is it, or do you deal with the format first and then walk around?
It's weird to articulate, which is interesting for a writer. But I started writing screenplays. So I'm a kid, 16 years old, and from 10 to 16, all I did was watch films and read books about writing. So the first screenplay I wrote was a Star Wars screenplay, and it won an award from the Dramatists Guild of America. So I understood how to write dialogue, how to write in a very visual sense and write screenplays. And then from that, I transitioned. My first short story in 2005 was a Star Trek short story. And now, and that won an award. And now my first novel, Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, was nominated. Didn't win, but it was nominated for the prestigious Scribe Award. So I say all that to say that I'm very fortunate, very lucky that that's how I started, because it taught me how to write and think, more importantly, how to think in different ways. So I look at all these mediums as a compression of time. With prose, you have all this time to explain what's happening with the character, in long-form prose, what's happening with the character, their thoughts, their inner thoughts, all of that. In a screenplay, it's a really compressed, finite amount of time that you have on the page, and you lean a lot on the visual medium and somewhat sound to convey a lot. So there's not always a lot on the actual page for the characters to speak as it is what we see. So thankfully, all that's in my head, so I can now transition very easily. And as you know as well, from really great of you inviting me to teach the fundamentals of storytelling for comics, for sequential art. It's once you have that in your head, it's not that difficult to make those transitions, and then to try and explain that and teach that to other people. But there are a lot of writers that never learned that, so they're not able to skip from one to the other,
And how did you find the experience teaching as well for yourself? So you've gone from taking in that information to now you're sharing, because you, of course, like, you had no finer teacher than Mr. Denny O'Neill himself as a student. And how have you found the experience? Have you been doing more teaching as you go around conventions as well? You've been very good you did a short course and a semester with us at TASQ Art. Your students at TASQ, because I think one did short and one did the part-time certificate, but they've gone on now to be published as well with the Light and Strike label here. So how have you been finding the teaching? Is that another dimension or shift? Do you find yourself echoing your teachers, or is it just you make your own kind of a pathway when you're guiding someone else?
Let me tell you, man, God bless him. I am definitely trying my best to channel Dennis O'Neill. The man made a profound, foundational, informative impact upon me. I mean, I was, I guess, mid-20s at the time. But he was really stern with me. But he gave me like the best compliment that anyone ever could give, or in my opinion, a writer. He said, that was like one day I was in the class. It was at the School of Visual Arts. I took his class 2 years in a row. And I was in the class, I was like, I don't know if I could write. I don't know if I have what it takes. You know, I read people like Frank Miller, which was his, in many ways, his protege, you know, because he started Miller on like Daredevil and I mean, Miller is a exceptional talent, but you can see how from O'Neill giving him certain things and pushing him in certain ways, I was like, I can never write like that. He said, Derek, look, man, the only difference is I read your stuff. I see where you're going. You're at the early stages of where you're going. He said, the only difference between you and Frank Miller is that you're shorter. It's the only difference. And I was like, what? You know, and he said that in front of the class. And so I have lived on those words for like all these years. I mean, look better. And, you know, I knew that he never BS'd anyone. That's just not who the man was, right? Mm-hmm. So I've tried to live up to that. And now when I teach and I have that opportunity to teach, I try and remember all that and pay that forward. You know, I'll be teaching this August, I believe, for the Pen Writers Association has asked me to do a class on short storytelling, and talk how the fundamentals of writing a short story, and all of Denny's things that he drilled into my head again also comes out of me. So yeah, it's a lot of fun then.
And it is great with the short story format because we were speaking to, when this goes out, I think it'll be going out after my conversation with Mr. Paul Levitz, but we were talking about the UK invasion of creators in the American comics scene in the 80s. And a lot of them, and the reason they honed their craft so well, so many Brits who were writing for comics, is because of 2000 AD. And they had the Future Shocks then, stories, which were like, they had to be a short story with a twist. But everyone from Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, Mark Millar, everyone would have started there, and the idea was you get your beginning, middle, and end, like a well-timed joke, set up, delivery, punchline. And when you're teaching writing, the goal is not to give them like hundreds of pages, thousands of words. It's to get it short, to the point, to know how to forge that link. How frustrated do you find that your students, or maybe yourself when you started out, got when it was like, I like the sandbox, I like being contained, I think it keeps me on target and, trim the fat off when I'm being too excessive, rambling. But did you ever find with your students, they come to you, I need more space, give me just that little bit more onto the word count?
That's a great question. And teaching for the TASQ Academy was really a fun experience. One thing I learned in that experience was that it's not enough to have like a blanket idea of what you want to teach. You also have to zero in on every student, and make them feel heard and seen, because they deserve to be, heard and seen. But then you have to you may have a blanket idea of what you want to teach, but then you have to tweak it for the individual. Mm-hmm. You really do. And I started seeing like little things, like I would say, look, you're going to want to write a lot, but if less will be more when you're writing a comic, and you're going to have to leave creative space for the artists. And I could see in their eyes, they're like, what was he talking about? But then by the time people graduated, I was hearing that back, and I got an email back that said just that. It was like, oh yeah, I have to leave creative space, for the artist. So hopefully you want to give students things that they can take, building blocks they can take with them and make their own. But you first got to see and hear them and what they're saying and speak to them,
Plus, if a student writes to you and say that you are right, make sure to frame that, hang it on your wall.
Right, because that's rare, right? So, yeah.
I do love it, though. It's so funny, my own teaching experience, when, sometimes with students, I understand the frustration. I always often say to them, I'm the canary down the mine shaft. I'm not teaching because I'm an expert who knows everything. I've made every mistake in the book. But because I've done that, I can advise them on what not to do. And, but I can see the frustration, so I'm like, do not do this. Trust me, you don't want to do it. But they do it anyway, because that's how you learn.
Yes.
Learn.
Exactly right.
but I love it when we're like old war veterans afterwards and they come to me after graduation and go, yeah, I get what you mean now. I'm like, it's okay. Pat them on the back. It's okay, bud. We've all been there. But when it comes to art, so one side is like when you've met some very influential people as a student, you've gone on to help form the next generation of creators as a teacher yourself. I've been very envious of some of the conventions you've been hitting up and the attendance you've been having. You've been meeting some, some great characters from the literary sci-fi world of film and TV as well. Particularly with the Sisko book, you've met some of the DS9 actors also. How's that experience been? Has it been exciting, jarring? Because it's like, okay, so you were the voice in my head when I was writing this, like you were a character. Well, how are those interactions been for you?
Oh, it's been. That's another great question. It's been a little nuts. I remember my first interview for the Sisko book was with Sirach Lofton.
Awesome.
And this was like once the book had been announced, and you could see he was a little like, who is this guy? And can he even understand what we did? Play, because Sirach played Jake Sisko and he played fine. And by the end of the interview, Sirach was like, oh, I think this might be a good book. I think you understand. And then I've met him a couple times, and he's the greatest guy, coolest. He signed my personal copy. My personal copy now has a huge chunk of Star Trek alumni, from him to, I think I have a lot of the characters of Deep Space Nine. I just met Andrew Robinson, who plays Garrick, had him, Terry Farrell, Sonequa Martin Green. She's mentioned in the book, so she signed it. I'm very thankful for that. And I'm thankful that people are still interested in this book, like 2 years running now, which is really, crazy. I thought it would have some press and then it would like die off, but people are still interested. And the paperback has been held off to allow the hardcover to do what it's doing. And it's just been, it was announced a little while ago that I think October of this year, the paperback is coming out. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
It's great, because like that was being what connected us first was the Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, because that was the series that got me into Star Trek. I think David A. Goodman started it, and it's interesting with the paperbacks because I've seen they've done with the previous iterations. They do box sets as well and stuff. So hopefully they make a future iteration.
I'm sure I'd like a 5-book box set.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Although there's one giant tom where they tie it all together, big massive cover.
That'd be great.
With Mr. Andrew Robinson, he himself also wrote A Stitch in Time, so he's very unique in that he portrayed a character, wrote a story as the character, did the audio book as the character.
Audio book.
Yeah. Did he share any of his experiences as a writer with you? Did that come up at all?
No, it's interesting because I become like a little kid when I'm with, in front of these people, and I'm just like, I don't want to infringe on their time.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And so I know he's there to meet, fans and sign for them. So I took my book and I said, your work, and not only his work on DS9, but the man is a phenomenal actor, going back to working with Clint Eastwood. And I mean, the man's incredible. But I said to him, I said, your work is incredible. The fact that you wrote A Stitch in Time, and now I have this autobiography, I told him, I said, humbly, I think these are really great bookends for Deep Space Nine. And so I gave him a copy, and I said, would you mind if I give you? He's like, no. So I wrote something for him and I gave him a copy, and then he wrote in my copy. So we kind of like exchange, he wrote in mine and I gave him a copy. So hopefully he'll have the opportunity to read it. But he's phenomenal actor and he's a phenomenal writer, and he is so keyed into Garrick that when of course I have the audio book. It's like I could just sit there all day and just listen to Garrick speaking. It's phenomenal, man.
Oh no, it's brilliant. And the way he portrays other characters in his audiobooks being pretty amazing. He just, obviously being around them, he understood the mannerisms, and he just, it was really good, solid performance. People should check it out because the book, I think, really now print for a while, and it's some people lament how expensive it is to find a copy, but the audiobook has given it a second life, I found. And it's definitely one if you're a DS9 fan. One of my biggest laments and regrets, I don't think it's like a definitive bullet point on it just yet, but one of our first master classes here was with Mr. Todd Stashwick, who played Captain Liam Shaw, and there was a sliver of time where we thought Mr. Avery Brooks, there might have been a direct line through some of the reps, and we were like, maybe we could get reading done, not like a full like recording, but just
right
something. But wasn't the stars weren't aligned just yet anyway for it. But do you know if Mr. Avery Brooks has managed to we get a copy, sent a copy, or is that just he's just seems to be more in the academic world now, I think, these days?
Yes, he is, and there's a lot I don't know. I would hope. I know from speaking to Sirach that he's certainly aware of it, and I know for a fact, I'll just be honest, if Sirach didn't like it, then I would have been like, burned at the, because you have to have approval of anyone, right? So Sirach liked it. Sirach told me that, if I'm remembering this correctly, I told Sirach I'm happy to get him a copy, to give to Mr. Brooks. He was like, no, he already has a copy.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, oh, okay. So, yeah.
That's great to hear, something like that would happen. And the one who spoils it all is Mulgrew came back. Mulgrew came back to narrate the autobiography of Captain Chainway, and as far as I'm aware, there's been no other audiobooks. Mr. Shatner did a reading of a chapter at Comic-Con from Goodman's first one, which is Captain Kirk's. Nothing, I think, was done with Jean-Luc Picard. Nothing for the Spock book. The Janeway book was the surprise because that just dropped, and then I hope like either Sirach or maybe Mr. Brooks or someone might consider it in the future. So who knows? That'd be good. Would you like to see it in audio format?
Let me tell you, the number one question I have gotten in the last 2 years, it happens like this every time. I like this book. That's the first statement that the person made. The second statement, when will it be an audio book? And I don't know. I don't know if it's going to happen. I've spoken to people, but I don't know if that will ever come to pass. But even if Mr. Brooks, like you said, if he just did like a page of it, and my thing would have like, let Sirach do the book.
Yes.
Let Sirach do it, and it's structured like that as well. That Sirach could do it, and it makes sense. And then maybe there's like one particular page, without spoiling anything, there's like one particular page in the book that Mr. Brooks could read, and that'd be it. And they would make. Let me tell you, people would be like, "Take my money, leave."
No, absolutely, because it was so funny when it was announced as the Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko. Everyone, including myself, was like, who's this gone? Even when I went to the reading at New York for the mini, not the book introduction, not really a launch, and I was like, so how's this going to work, Derek? Because, this goes into the wormhole, what's happening? And then you say, I think I figured it out, and then we're all there just waiting to see, okay, what's going to happen? And then it is a brilliant narrative device you employed in that you managed, of course, Jake being a journalist and a writer would be the one to compose the story, but then having it as a message delivered by Sisko, it was a great marriage. It worked out perfectly, and everyone who was ready to give out to you for not knowing the difference between autobiography and biography can finally silence them. But I suppose that was one of the interesting narrative devices you had. The other was a sense of time. Like it is by definition a non-linear story because the sequences are out of place. However, the bulk of the narrative does serve as a traditional chronological development because you had the core bullet points. I felt in my reading, because teaching interactive storytelling is one of the modules I teach, we look at, linear and non-linear, string of pearls, amusing part, and I was like, was there any kind of mapping out on a whiteboard as something where you might have done some branching, like a family tree aspect of figuring out, this plot point will take us and here, because it did read as a game, writer writing I got that.
Right. Yes. Really, you see what we're talking about is both of us have knowledge and experience in screenwriting, from writing comics or screenplays or screenplays. And so we understand how to twist and use and compress time, which is what I was talking about earlier. And if anything is nonlinear, it's Deep Space Nine and Sisko's life, right? So I didn't really use a whiteboard. I wrote it all out. I kept it in my head, which is nuts. I kept it in my head and then wrote it all out in the outline. But I realized that if I tell this person's story from being a child to an adult, because of Sisko and the nature of where he's at, there had to be moments that were nonlinear, that just pull you out of the story I'm telling and tell a whole other story. And I had planned originally to just do that one time in the book. And then had a really great discussion with Una McCormick, and she is the writer of the
Janeway and
Spock autobiographies. And so I sent her my outline, and she had sent me her outlines, and which was really great. We like sent each other's outlines, you know, and I was like, oh, I can't use her outline at all. You know, I thought maybe I could like, you know, figure, but I couldn't use it at all. But when I gave her my outline, she's like, you know, this non-linear thing is really cool that you're doing. She says, and I know you only want to do it once. She said, you could do it more than once.
Yeah.
And you know, 'cause I was afraid to do it more than once and confuse the reader. But then from her discussion, I was like, oh, she's right. And then I realized that if you read those 3 moments that I put in the book that are nonlinear by themselves, they tell a story. They tell a story of Bajor's past, present, and future.
Yep.
So kudos and thanks to her for putting, because sometimes you can't see things, you see a part of it, but not the whole part, you know. So that was great. And it allowed people to know what it feels like for Ben to be like he's talking and then he's pulled out of that conversation into a nonlinear moment, you know. So yeah.
Oh, it's great. And there's a book, I forget the artist's name, I'm blanking on it. I think his first name might be Manu, but he's a Parisian based in LA, I believe, economist. But he wrote a book it was on something called Inkshare, so like a Kickstarter-esque project, and it's called Trekonomics. And he basically was you might have heard of it because it was
I've heard of it, yeah, I've heard of it.
It was a really good text, and he's basically saying about how does the meritocracy of Star Trek work from an economic point of view. Like, why would people bother working if you have replicators? And something about, you know, the Sisko restaurant being, you know, well, it's about the merit and the quality and the handcraft. And then you had a very interesting take where you likened it to the almost like an Amish kind of community in New Orleans. That was very inspired. I really appreciate that approach. Was that always your point of view from when you were a viewer of the TV show? Was that part of your own headcanon, or did that come about when you started writing the novel?
It started a little bit of both, because I always wondered, you know, I know like Picard tells like Lily in First Contact, you know, humans of the future aspire to better themselves. And she's like, well, how do you get paid? You know, and he's like, nah, you know, money is not our thing anymore. It's, you know, it's the inner journey, you know, and so I always wondered, like, what was that like? And then when I had the opportunity to write the book, I'm like, well, you know, why are you going to slave over a kitchen and work for 8-10 hours a day to feed people? What is your desire to do that? And I'm like, well, it's because you enjoy it, because you would love it, you know, and because Louisiana and New Orleans has always been a service industry town since its origins. And people wouldn't let that go because money is gone or because technology now creates replicators. They still want to preserve and hold on to that culture. And specifically Joseph Sisko, he loves cooking, so he wants to preserve and hold on to that culture. And so that gave me an understanding of how to approach Earth and places on Earth on the 24th century, that some of them they don't want all the technology. They want to preserve the culture. And that's more important to them than a transport or replicator. And I thought that was a very interesting take. And a lot of people that have read it, that's like one of the most interesting things that a lot of people say, I can identify with that. I get that. That's the way it should be in Star Trek, where we can have all those things if we want them.
Yep.
But we don't have to lose our culture and who we are. You know, who we are is more important than the technology. So a lot of people like that. I'm thankful that they saw what I was trying to say with that.
Yeah, it's one that I find. I teach some business modules, and I often find myself going back to Trekonomics. I find myself going back to Star Trek and the meritocracy aspect, because we are seeing it more in a modern society, current day, in real life. Because the idea of meritocracy, I think it's a little bit through a warped fun mirror, in that you have the Instagram life where people are compelled to show the best iteration, and then, for want of a better way of putting it, it's like the jealousies of others wish to also have that experience of life. Now, Trek shows something similar in a far more positive light, which is you see something like Starfleet, where you're not being paid, but there's a hierarchy, but people aspire to be the best captain, the best admiral. So it's now a jealousy that motivates them, but as you were saying, the enjoyment inside them to want to excel and express that. The currency of the 24th century is the willingness to want to be the best you can be. And then the other thing that we're seeing is the disruption and so many conversations around AI as well, because obviously in Trek, AI was always prevalent in certain ways with holodecks, with replicators and stuff. Now we're seeing, okay, now the contributions of, writers and artists, there's currently at this point of recording, Disney and others are starting to take legal action against some of the AI companies at the moment for infringement of use of IP and their recognizable characters. I've been asking a lot of the guests we've had on previous episodes, well, how do you feel about AI just in general? Has it been something that's been a source of anxiety, or has it presented itself as just another tool to you? Any pros, any cons, any thoughts at all? It's been interesting. Some have managed to completely sidestep it. They're like, well, it's not really interfering with what I'm doing at the moment. But any comments or thoughts when it comes towards AI itself?
Oh gosh, yeah, man. I have lots of thoughts. It's interesting because these kind of things that we're talking about kind of go hand in hand, right? There's a line in the Sisko book where Joseph, Ben's father, is telling his son, Ben, when he's younger, there's a difference between being entertained and being fulfilled, And a lot of people use their 24th century technology for shortcuts, but that doesn't leave you fulfilled. And I think one of the traps of AI, I think AI can be a good tool for certain things. I've used AI personally. I've been doing some research, and so I've been reading a lot of scientific papers, like working on something that's hard science. And so I'll say to AI, here are these 5 papers from these 5 scientists. Some of the stuff is over my head. Bring it down to a high school level, just so it can be articulated, because these papers are not meant for the layman to read. They're meant for other peers in those fields to read. So bring it down for me, and then I'll read those papers. That's great. That's using AI as a tool. Would I ever have AI physically write something for me? Heck no. Because then I'm taking away something from myself. It's almost like saying that my ability and my soul and my life experiences are not as important, because maybe I'm looking for expediency by using this thing, And I think there are a lot of people that they may not know how to write at all, and they say, well, hey, I don't know how to write, so I just want to use this thing to help me write. I understand the desire for that, but what AI is doing is that it is pulling from millions of places, learning, and in a sense plagiarizing, teach itself to give you what you want, And I found out recently that elements of the Sisko book have been used for AI.
No.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people, a lot of writers out there, authors out there that their work is being used to teach AI, and I don't think that's fair. If you're going to do that, then I think authors need to be approached and some sort of equitable contract, in all honesty, needs to be created. Because if you want to teach your system how to write like a Derek Attico or Dayton Ward or David Mack, pay those guys, pay us. First ask us. We may say no. I might say no. And if we do say yes, then pay us, for that. But a lot of people feel like this is just something that you can just unleash on the world. But unleashing it without any sense of morality, I think, is wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's such an evolving moment. Curiously enough, a previous guest in the podcast, Mr. Paul Kupperbug, had also described similar to what you just mentioned. He was doing a book on the history of medicine, and he used AI to help with the materials, just like, okay, get these articles and stuff, and then wrote it himself, obviously. But he said, as an experiment, he asked the AI to write something just to see what it'd be like, and the quality just isn't.
It's not. It's not.
Not at the moment. I had a meeting with some colleagues in academia earlier this week, where we have to address, we're recording here now in June, the next academic term is in September, so we need to figure out and update our handbooks and stuff. But AI, we recognise it's here now. We know whether we ask them to or not, students will be using it. So we have to accept and figure out how to ethically incorporate it into the classroom. And like, to some extent, it does equate to what we would have typically used for spell check and grammar checks and stuff. But then the one or two elements where we just have to, take a moment and pause. It's like idea generation and stuff. I'm like, oh, that's a slippery slope. I find personally, but we'll see how we can, we evolve with it. And one side, it's exciting, but it's also ironic. Like even the show DS9, there was, Quark and the holodeck was like he having people's likeness, and like there's a whole law against it. Even Shrek had rules. You can't use people's likeness or stuff, But and then I suppose my only other question around the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, and then we can just move on to some of your other works as well, was you introduced, and I was surprised at this, and I think a few other readers as well, in the best possible way, but you introduced so much more the Sisko family, like unknown siblings and such, and that was a really interesting, because it doesn't really write or change anything into the show, but now it's like, I think if you watch the show, you can see, Captain Sisko is an only child, but then after reading the text, you realize, oh no, he had siblings, he had a much wider family. What was the prompt to expand the Sisko tree, and also was that a big ask of CBS or Titan or the license holders to add new characters in that way?
Well, I'll start with the second question first. CBS, Paramount, and Titan gave me no real parameters. Not really. The only parameter I had was my editor, George Sanderson, who's phenomenal. He's the managing editor of Titan. He's like, you write really, you really go out there sometimes, Derek. You need to bring it in a little. And he was like, bring it in a little, because he had read my other work, my short stories. He's like, you really do these big swings, bring it in a little. Other than that, they didn't really give me any mandate at all, which was told me that they trusted me, and was very freeing. However, the show itself did constrain me a little, because in second season, I believe, one episode, I believe the name of the episode is Paradise. And Ben mentions he has two brothers.
Oh, okay.
And that's it. It's like one line. We never hear or see. He mentions it again. That's it. So now that's canon. So I have to do that. Then in the seventh season, he mentions that he has a sister. And we're like, what? Where are these people,
Yeah.
So then it came to me to create, two brothers and a sister. And I said, okay, well, if that's going to be the case, then, let me really do this really well. So what I did was I created twin brothers for him. And one is really into sports and one is a chef. And so I thought, that's very interesting. That's very different. And his sister just has like from a even in the book from a child, she has this beautiful voice, and she becomes like literally interstellar vocalist in the Alpha Quadrant. So this is why we don't see these people.
Yeah,
They have their own lives, and they're doing their own thing. Just died, which is crazy. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you fine. Yeah, yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, I get you fine.
Brilliant.
So they have their own lives. And then once I started creating them, I was like, I could even go back a little bit further, and I can create Ben's grandparents, Joseph's parents, and really flesh out the family. 'Cause I know how instrumental and influential my grandparents were to me,
Mhm.
right? And I don't think I'm an isolated, individual. I mean, I think we all, on some level, have a person, whether it was a grandparent or a person of a certain age from a previous generation that has imparted some kind of wisdom to us, And it sounds like grandparents, right? Who doesn't, everybody loves grandparents. And so I gave him grandparents. And so what we start to see is just generations of Sisko are in this book. And it helps to flesh out the man that we see on the show, because he's so fully realized and balanced. And now you can look at the book and say, okay, now I understand why, because of his family structure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's, we were discussing, I think just after the book came out, but people were approaching it. It is a very, not like tearjerker per se, but emotionally charged at moments in the book. And you said there were some people walking through grieving process and found great comfort in what you were writing as well. And that must, it'd be nice to get the $1 million check, and stuff. But something like that, as an artist, as a writer, when someone comes and says, "No, your work, your contribution has touched me, helped me in a pivotal moment, I walked through something," that must just put you on top of the wall. Then when
That's
happened.
Everyone likes money, right? But that's more important. That's more valuable to me. I've had people say to me that it's helped them with the grieving process. One individual said it helped him reconsider suicide.
Oh wow!
I was like, and I'm just, wow, there are some moments that are, I guess, yes, you could say tear jerkers, but I think life is full of happy moments and moments that may not necessarily break us, but sometimes knock us on our butt, and I think to understand a person's life, you have to experience those. I know I've had them. I'm sure we all have stories. There are 8 billion people on the planet. We all have stories, and we know love and loss. And so I try to infuse some of that to this Ben and the Sisko family, and I think it resonated with a lot of people.
Amazing. So, and as you were saying, the Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, hardback is still available, paperback coming in October.
Yep.
Audio adaptation, TV series.
We hope, right? We hope.
Exactly.
Tell people, contact Titan and say, hey, I want the autobiography, audio book of the Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko.
Absolutely.
And the needle.
Yeah, this is, and even just from an accessibility point of view, there's merit for it as well. There's an audience there who would like to, I'm sure, to enjoy the story. And speaking to the audio sides, you've recently transitioned into doing podcasts. So you come to your first year now, is it? Yeah, or still in year one?
It's still year one, but I've split. I split my show. So my first 4 episodes were my first season, which I call book 1. And I'm now on season 2, which is book 2 of Soul of the Story. And it's a podcast done in conjunction with Sci-Fi Sisters and Sci-Fi Sisters Inc. So I do it under their umbrella. They handle the production, and I am thankful of that. And I speak to established artists in their various professions and try to get to the soul of their story and how they view and understand storytelling, whether they're painters or dancers or musicians or actors or writers. how has storytelling impacted them and how they feel about it. I just had an interview with Bruce Horak, who plays Chief Engineer Hemmer on Strange New Worlds.
Amazing.
Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And it was a really, really interesting conversation because he's legally blind. And he's the first person in Star Trek, first actor to play a actual blind character. Like LeVar Burton obviously is sighted, playing Geordi LaForge. And, he explained to me that he's blind in one eye. The sight he has in his other eye is like looking through the hole of a straw, And to have that kind of limited vision, but then to still accomplish the things he's accomplished. He's an accomplished painter, an actor, a writer. He's going to let the world in any way hold him back. And we discussed a lot of that and what that means and what that means for him in the storytelling. So it was a really fun discussion. Those are the kind of discussions I like to have with people.
No, it's great. And you can check it out I know it's on YouTube, and is it available on all podcast platforms or is the particular platform?
It's available under the Sci-Fi Sisters podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's available on YouTube, again, under the Sci-Fi Sisters podcast. And once you go there, you can just look for Soul the Story, or there's links on my own website, and you can find it that way. Derek Tyler.
Perfect. And how did you get to know Sci-Fi Sisters?
They came to a convention, man, and it's just the reality of the world that there are not a lot of Black science fiction writers. There really are very, very few of us that have written anything Star Trek. 6% of Black people are in publishing, only 6%. So less than that for science fiction, right?
Yeah.
And these are four lovely Black ladies that talk about not just Black culture, but they talk about the fact that they love science fiction and their impressions of it, from their own personal histories. They came to a con looking for me. Like, you don't really know that has written things that the Star Trek, and you're a Black writer, and we just had a really good rapport, and I loved what they were doing. They've had interviews with Anson Mount. They've had interviews with a lot of the actors across all of Star Trek, and so I was like, they came to me and said, we're thinking about branching out. How would you feel about doing a show with us? And I was like, oh, that's great. And I always wanted to do a show. So it was like a perfect marriage. Really came together really well.
That's been great. It's good because for as long as I've known you, even that first reading in New York, they were the ones to help cater and host the event. And it was just great. So yeah, definitely, everyone should definitely check out Sci-Fi Sisters Inc. They're doing fantastic work.
Beautiful.
Love. And so I suppose just to wrap things up then, what's next on the horizon? I noticed you mentioned you're working on an academic Trek book now. Mom, that's just recently new, isn't it? Hmm?
Right. That's recently new. We just posted about that yesterday or the day before. I wrote a chapter for an academic book, which was great. I was invited to do that with several writers that I know, Jim Johnson, Kelly Fitzpatrick, Michael Dismuke. We were invited to contribute chapters on Star Trek and leadership,
Nice.
which for this book, which is really great. And for my chapter, I believe that there are 4 foundational elements of Star Trek, which also work for leadership, which is science, exploration, friendship, and hope. So I wrote about those 4 elements and how they relate to Star Trek and how they relate to leadership for us today. And it was well received. So when it comes out, I think people are going to enjoy it.
That's great. And is there a release date for it yet? Is that still in production?
Not yet. As far as we know, sometime the fall, so probably the end of 25, maybe even early 26.
Excellent. And so we have podcast, we have Star Trek and leadership, and anything else that you're currently that you could talk about, I suppose, at the moment.
I got some stuff that I can't talk about. I'm working on a novel, which I told you. I'm working on a novel. I have another novel outline that I've completed and doing. So I've got a lot of irons in the fire. My idea is to get as much done this summer and into the end of 25, so I can start to unveil and come out with these things of my own and some other projects I've done in 26. So we'll see.
Fantastic. And so if folks want to keep in touch or find out what's happening, where's the best place to follow you?
I'm everywhere on social media under D Attico, Dattico. So you can find me on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, and you can also go to my website, derekattico.com.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much, Derek. It's been wonderful catching up with you again. I'm sure we'll be having conversations again in the near future. Until next time, take care.
Man, thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Take care.
Many thanks again to Derek for joining us for this episode of Creating Conversation. I hope we'll have an opportunity to invite him back to teach at the Academy once more. It was always a joy just catching up with Derek, and just off mic he was filling me in on some of the projects he currently has in production, pre-production ideas he's knocking around, and it's very, very exciting stuff. Like, Derek is going to really blow a lot of people away with what he has lined up in the very near future. Just a quick note before we close out this episode. At this point of recording, we will have just announced within the last week our next masterclass at TASQ Art, and it's featuring none other than the legendary Frank Miller, who you will know as being the artist and writer behind some of the amazing titles as Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, 300, Sin City, Ronin. So many influential titles, helped to redefine the genre, the medium, even the idea of the superhero itself, particularly with Dark Knight Returns. Mr. Miller's family originates from Ireland, but he has never had the opportunity until now to visit. So we will have a live and in-person masterclass here at the Edge Dublin, where our academy is located. All members of the academy will have guaranteed entry to this event, so that's included within membership. So if you're a student or if you are a member, you'll be able to come along. If you are not a member but are still very much interested in attending, you can purchase tickets, but again, at this point of recording, tickets are gone quite quickly, so you will have to visit our social media at TASQ Art, that's TASQART, and you should find a link to the Frank Miller Masterclass. Or if you go to Lightning Strike Comics, that's lightningstrikecomics.com, and go to the online store, you can purchase tickets there as well. Very limited quantity, and tickets will go fast. I will point out that this is the second attempt to get Mr. Miller over to the Academy as well. We had to reschedule due to upcoming events and other considerations last year. This year, he's coming. It's tying in in close proximity to another event. He's literally finishing an event in the US and coming back over to us here in Ireland. As a result, this is going to be a very much to-the-wire event. So for those of you who really, this is once in a lifetime opportunity. If you're really interested, I'd advise you not to wait and think I'll catch the podcast episode, or you might see him at another event. There's no guarantee there, folks. I can give you that guarantee that there's no guarantee. So thanks very much again for listening to this podcast. If you enjoy what you heard, please consider liking and subscribing. And until next time, this has been a copyright production of Macaulay Consultancy 2025.